Lizzo cannot be feeling good about this one. 3 of her former dancers have filed a lawsuit claiming hostile work environments and more. And yeah, I know a lot of you have probably seen the banana headlines, but what is she actually being accused of? We have the full lawsuit. Let's break it down. Welcome to Popcorn Planet. I am Andy Signor, and guys, you know it's bad when Beyonce is leaving your name out of a song. That's right. Just last night, I guess in one of the tours, Lizzo is in the song that she typically does, but she did Badu twice. You know it's bad when Beyonce is picking a side. And before we even get to this lawsuit, I want to be clear, it's not even just these 3 dancers. Now her former documentary director has come forward calling her arrogant, self-centered, and unkind. I usually do not comment on anything pop culture related, but in 2019, I traveled a bit with Lizzo to be the director of her documentary. I walked away after about 2 weeks, and I was treated with such disrespect by her. I witnessed how arrogant, self-centered, and unkind she is. I was not protected and was thrown into a bad situation with little support. My spirit said to run as fast as you effing can, and I'm so grateful I trusted my gut. I felt gaslit and was deeply hurt, but I've healed. Regarding these reports made me realize how dangerous the situation was. This kind of abuse of power happens far too often. Much love and support to the dancers. And it wasn't just her. Another dancer, or another person involved. I'm not part of the lawsuit, but this was very much my experience and my time there. Big shout out to the dancers who had the courage. So a lot of people coming forward to reinforce the stuff that's being said in this lawsuit by these dancers. So I wanted to go through, I highlighted the most important parts of this document. I want to break it down. We're actually going to have Christopher Melcher on later today. So if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button, hit the bell for all alerts, smash that like button. This will be a 2-parter. Hit the like. I want to break down the actual accusations and give you my thoughts, all of it down, and then we'll get Christopher to actually answer some of the questions we're going to have legally as to, is this actually illegal? Because my big overview for the too long if you didn't watch, yeah, Lizzo doesn't sound good. Lizzo and her staff don't sound good in this. It's just not a good thing. But legally, there's a lot of complaining that feels like it's over exaggerated, and the lawsuit's written in a way where they're focusing on race and a lot of other stuff that they're allowed to sort of sue on defamation wise. What's actually real here? The truth is probably somewhere in the middle, but even in the middle, Lizzo looks real bad. I mean, one last thing I'll give overview. I'm going to try to take away my opinion as I read this because I just want you guys to hear it, but there's a lot of stuff about the reality show that 2 of them worked on, and all that stuff just feels completely unrelated to me. It's like, it's a reality show. What did you expect? Some of these situations they're about to describe to you, I'm like, welcome to the entertainment industry. And I'm not trying to say it should be right or wrong, but that's just how it is. If you want to work in the entertainment industry, you're surrounded by weirdos. You're signing away all of your rights. You're going to be exploited. They're going to talk about anything you give them as free game to put on air. Just don't go on reality shows if you can't handle it mentally. And most people can. You have to be very strong-willed mentally or a psychopath in order to be able to succeed in reality TV or in charge of it. So you look, you're in control of the edit. But that's just a warning I like to blank with everybody. So I have a little bit of less empathy on the reality show portion of it. But that said, Lizzo and team are not looking good. All right, so let's just break down. Here's what the terms say. So they're suing Big Girl Production Touring, Lizzo, and there's another woman named Miss Quigley who's a judge on the reality show. We'll get to her in a second. But the 3 plaintiffs are Miss Davis, Miss Williams, and Miss Rodriguez. Now, just so we're clear here, Miss Davis and Miss Williams were contestants for the Watch Out for the Big Girls reality show. I guess it was on Amazon. They were reality show contestants. And it's important to remember, they submitted to psychological examinations to make sure they were psychologically healthy enough to endure the filming of the reality show. And during that, they disclosed some medical stuff, including that they struggle with anxiety, depression, and binge eating. And the waiver of privilege and confidentiality consent basically made it very clear that any of that information could be disclosed to production, its representatives, etc., any entities in the show as deemed appropriate by the doctor or by the production. So basically, this means anything you told this doctor is going to be used against you in production. Now, that's important to come back because I'm just going to reiterate some things that she says. I never gave permission. You did. When you signed this form, you gave away a lot of permissions. And I'm curious if Christopher will disagree, but we'll find out in part 2. Miss Rodriguez, the 3rd plaintiff, was hired. She was a hired dancer and performed in one of the music videos. And she complains that she wasn't given opportunities to do other jobs. This is a complaint that comes from all the dancers are going to have, where they're basically freelance dancers. And Lizzo's team wants them to keep the dates free and not take other gigs and always be available for them. But the dancer's like, well, I got to take other gigs because I need to pay my bills. And they're like, well, do you want the job or not? And so it's like a stress and a pressure that comes with a lot of freelance Hollywood opportunities. But yeah, the production should not be demanding that you take off and don't accept other work. You got to pay people to hold the days, which they find out later. All right, so Miss Rodriguez was officially booked. And then all of them, I guess, at that point, Miss Rodriguez was booked. And she then, sorry, I'm confusing she was booked on that. Next up, Miss Davis and Miss Williams were introduced to Miss Quigley. She's going to come into play one of the judges on the reality show. She was very vocal of her religious belief and took every opportunity to proselytize, regularly preaching at us about her Christian identity. Okay, but you're on a reality show. So is this... sorry, I'm trying to hold my opinions to myself. Maybe I won't. Maybe I'll change my mind. During filming, Miss Quigley discovered that Miss Davis had her V card still. And that became a topic of extreme importance. Yeah, that happens on most reality shows I can think of. When you call yourself the V... everyone then, oh, wow, that becomes your identity on the reality show. Miss Davis never gave Miss Quigley permission to share this detail. You did, though, when you signed the forms, so I disagree with you there. And anyway, so that frustration about her V card being used for the show, and then she had to participate in a photo shoot where they had to wear nothing, and that made them very uncomfortable. And they believed if they didn't do it, they would be sent home. This flared into extreme distress and broke down in tears while on set struggling to choose between a once-in-a-lifetime career opportunity and putting her body on display against her will. But then they reveal ultimately she didn't have to do that. She put on a nude bra and underwear. So why didn't you just ask for that, demand it? It's confusing to me. This, though, foreshadowed the charged, uncomfortable environment later. Again, I got to red flag some of this. This is a reality show. Look, this is a bigger topic. Should reality shows have clear standards? Maybe, yeah. But I'm sure the contracts made it very clear that they can pretty much do whatever or you're removed from the show because it's casting. And it's they're producers and it's all reality shows are gross. But let's get to the tour because I think the touring part's more interesting because when the reality show's not taping, how is Lizzo and company treating their employees now, right? Let's talk about that. They wrapped filming and now all three dancers are part of this Lizzo tour and they performed at several festivals through 2021 and April 2022. Miss Quigley apparently continued to preach a lot about her Christianity and sexuality. She had a party trick where she would show what she does to a banana in front of the cast and made them uncomfortable. She also talked about her love tactics. Again, I usually don't. Religion, it's against my religion, but I had an oopsie. And then talked about her perverse fantasies of having 10 of these in her face. Look, inappropriate, with no doubt. What? Why? Why are you talking about this? Anyway, that is weird. So Miss Quigley was definitely very charged and also singling out Miss Davis for her V card status and Miss Rodriguez for being a non-believer. So it didn't sound like it was a very good environment to work in. Before rehearsals, the TN's team would pray together, but it was not official requirement. They felt like they needed to do that. There was a lot of pressure is a key word in a lot of this. But again, I'm very curious on Christopher's, how does that work with freelance dance crews, etc.? We'll find out. But this is a lot of pressure to do things, even though they make it clear in this document, it was never required. Miss Williams accidentally brushed up against one of the tour bus drivers. The driver said, "You can back up on me anytime." That freaked her out. Another separate driver, would play explicit songs on the tour bus, unclear what, but that made them fear their safety. No other mention of the truck drivers or any other behavior incidences, but they complained, nothing was done, and so they felt like they were ignored. During the tour, again, now here comes the soft hold. The dancers were basically being asked to do this soft hold, which means they would not be paid during the break and couldn't take other jobs. They learned that the musicians and other members of the tour were on a retainer in which they were paid portions of their job, and they complained. Eventually, they complained. That's going to come into the thing. They eventually asked for 50%. The crew's like, well, no, we'll give you 25%. But that created an animosity to the crew, apparently, and that's why they hated the dancers. Look, the bottom line is they should have been paying the dancers better. At the same time, I'm sure a rate's a rate. It's up to the performers to require that. Unless you have a union or something, you don't get what you don't ask for. They're going to take advantage of you as long as they can until you stand up for yourself. On February 23rd, they performed in a show in Amsterdam. Now, this is where all the headlines are jumping. This is the bananas. So the invitations were not unusual and not mandatory, but it was well known that dance members who were endeared themselves to Lizzo often were favored and selected to perform at other shows outside, etc. Lizzo also mentioned that her eyes and ears are everywhere and only wanted good people with good energy. So they're basically saying, like, by not attending, we didn't get the other gigs, so we had to befriend ourselves to Lizzo. Yeah, of course, Lizzo's going to want to surround herself and reward the people that are doing the job the best in her eyes and are friendliest with her. I could see that. Is that legally incorrect? Again, a good question we'll ask Christopher next. So this friend, singer on the tour, Chwanta, sorry if I'm saying that incorrectly, Chwanta basically rushed the dancers to agree or decline to this party. They went. They then show up, and it's a nightclub in Amsterdam called Banana Bar in the red light district. You'd think red flags went off, but they didn't. They then felt like pressured to go in. They couldn't back out. They said, well, Lizzo already has the head count. Feeling the looming pressure of job insecurity, plaintiffs couldn't abstain. They then reluctantly went along for the evening. Lizzo began inviting cast members to take turns, touching performers who were not wearing things and catching projectiles from the performers and their, bits. I got to be careful. Also eating bananas, protruding from, use your imagination. Lizzo then turned the attention to Davis, who began pressuring her to touch one of the performers. She said, I'm good. I don't want to. Not wanting to touch. The chant grew louder, more strident. I'd rather not because I'm cool. Finally, it became overwhelming. A mortified Davis acquiesced in an attempt to bring an error. Briefly touched the performer. The group burst into laughter. Miss Davis abashedly laughed along, trying to hide how uncomfortable his interaction made her. Her efforts to conceal her discomfort were apparently unsuccessful. On separate occasions, her security team asked if she was okay. She said kind of to one and then no to another. So interesting if those people will come forward and admit that, and if it really matters, given that this was a extracurricular activity, not really on the payroll. I'm curious if this is, again, not right of Lizzo and the team, but is it illegal is what I'm curious. So they weren't able to avoid her public displays of affection with her boyfriend. Eventually, the couple took the singer Chwanta and two other members to a back room. I don't know what they're trying to imply, but apparently, they didn't want to watch her make out with her boyfriend while they're out in a party in private. Lizzo began to pressure members of her security team, and then apparently made one of them go up on stage, and then he take it off, while he exposed his buttocks. Plaintiffs were aghast with how little regard Lizzo showed for her bodily autonomy of her employees and those around her, especially in the presence of many people whom she employed. That's the charge here. She then invited them out to another place, Crazy Horse, which they didn't. Plaintiffs were shocked that Lizzo would conceal the nature of the event from them, robbing them of their choice not to participate. Apparently, again, they weren't wearing clothes at this event. Again, you're at the red light district. You just experienced this at a club. Why would you go to a second club? I'm tired. I'm going to go to bed. And if she fires you, doesn't it feel like at that point you say, well, maybe this isn't a job for me. This environment's not what I'm comfortable in. At what point does it become it's confusing. I'm curious what you guys think in the comments. At the same time, like, she shouldn't be forced to do this. That's what's weird here. And that's why Lizzo is in the wrong morally, I think, and looking awful. But is it illegal is what I'm curious about. Then after they asked for that job, the half of what they asked for the 25%, or they asked for 50% of this for holding their time. They're getting 25%. Later, one of the accountants scolds the dancers for unacceptable and disrespectful behavior while on tour, saying that it was cause for termination. Nowhere in the email did Miss Joshi explain what they did. Only the dance cast, comprised of full-figured women of color, were ever spoken to in this manner, given plaintiff's impression that these comments were charged with racial and fat-phobic animus. Email marked the beginning of a strained relationship. Now, this is where they lose me, and I can't hide my opinion. What? How do you know how he's responding to everybody else? Or she is? You've been in every conversation she's had? Okay. 1. 2, based on what? So now they're racist and fat-phobic by saying they're unacceptable and disrespectful. We got to get a little bit more on this, but this is where things get a little wonky. Fortunately, despite their advances, the dancers made obtaining a retainer became clear that the management began to lash out the dancers. Because they wanted more money, they were fat-phobic and racist towards them. They treated black members of the dance team differently than the other members. Consisted almost entirely of white Europeans who often accused the black members of the dance team for being lazy, unprofessional, and having bad attitudes. Not only these words ring familiar with tropes for black women to disparage them, but the same accusations were not leveled against dancers who are not black. Okay. Lizzo then arrived and called the dance cast together for a meeting, addressing the rumors of unprofessionalism. During this meeting, Lizzo also, just a pause. It seems like you don't want these jobs. It does, because you're not comfortable. That's probably why, maybe, right? So that's probably where maybe this is coming from. Who knows? Lizzo then states the meeting. The dancers that were not performing up to par and accused the dancers of drinking alcohol before shows, even though the dance cast had never partaken in such practice. Lizzo then stated all the dancers would be required to re-audition on the spot, and if she was dissatisfied, they would be fired. An excruciating re-audition process then happened where they had to go through the entire 90-minute show. What was supposed to be an 8-hour rehearsal extended to almost 12 hours. The re-audition was brutal as dancers were not allowed a break. They were fearing repercussions of exiting the stage during the run. Miss Davis remained on stage dancing in soiled clothes until there was a brief segment. And then she had to put on some transparent clothing, the only option that was available, which made her uncomfortable. Again, this doesn't sound good. This doesn't sound good. But is it illegal? Lizzo called another meeting with the dance to reiterate that none of their jobs were safe. Once again, Lizzo mentioned that drinking alcohol before the show was prohibited, an accusation that was not based on any reality. Miss Williams then went on to rebut the allegation. And then others chimed up saying that's not true. Lizzo mockingly responded, well, if you're not, then good for y'all. Then stated that maybe the accusations of drinking before shows were on account of the dancers' poor performance. From this moment on, the tension between Lizzo, Miss Williams was palpable. Now, again, is this because they're fat and racist? Is Lizzo doing that? Or was it only the white European? Because now it seems like she's calling them all out. But were there white dancers there too? It's confusing. Plus, are all the dancers fat? Am I using the wrong? I'm fat. I'm allowed to use fat because I'm fat, right? Aren't they all fat? I'm confused. Miss Davis called into a private meeting with Lizzo and the choreographer. Miss Squat questioned whether Miss Davis was struggling with something and seemed less committed to a role in the dance cast. Miss Lizzo and Miss Scott pressed Miss Davis for an explanation why she seemed less bubbly and vivacious than she did prior to the tour. In professional dance, a dancer's weight gain is often seen in that dancer getting lazy or worse off as a performer. Lizzo's and Miss Scott's questions about Miss Davis' commitment to the tour were thinly veiled concerns about Miss Davis's weight gain? What? This comes out of nowhere. So everyone's jumping on, body positive Lizzo is body shaming. I see no evidence of that in this whole claim. They just throw it in there as a caveat, which Lizzo had previously called attention to after noticing it at South by Southwest Music Festival. That's never detailed. So I'm like, well, what? Huh? That's a big part of this, and especially Lizzo's credibility. So I need more, but this was a thinly veiled concern. Talk about an over-exaggeration, jump to conclusion. That's my problem with this claim. When you really read it all, part of me is like Team Lizzo, like, oh, these are disgruntled workers. But then you're also like, no, Lizzo sounds awful. It's like a combo. Everybody sounds awful, in my opinion. Lizzo, Miss Scott never explicitly stated it. These questions, accompanied by Lizzo's statements made after the South by Southwest Music Festival, gave Miss Davis the impression that she needed to explain her weight gain and disclose intimate personal details. She disclosed that she had anxiety with depression and binge eating. In response, Lizzo and Miss Scott dismissively offered Miss Davis time off of rehearsals to attend therapy. This offer seemed strange. Did they offer to pay for it? And made it feel like if she accepted the time off, Lizzo would then see her as too weak to continue as a member of the tour dance. Maybe you needed it, though. And yeah, maybe don't work with this psycho. Accordingly, Miss Davis declined, thinking it was the only choice she could to keep her job. This meeting took place immediately before a show, and even though she was hurt, she went and still performed that night. Good. So anyway, then she was terminated in the lobby due to budget cuts. Miss Williams isn't the best of these things. Lizzo wouldn't meet with her after she got fired. And then someone said, well, we never had any problem with you. And it was just very odd why she gets fired. And then She reminded she then takes the rest of the crew together, the dancers, and states that they were questioning why she hadn't fired Miss Williams directly. Lizzo demanded to know who questioned her decision to fire Miss Williams and reminded the dance cast that she had her eyes and ears everywhere. Lizzo also stated her preference that the dance cast refrain from socializing with Miss Williams before she left. So again, if this is true, Lizzo sounds awful. Miss Davis, who suffers from an eye condition, which Lizzo and were aware of, sometimes becomes disoriented in a stressful situation. Well, that's not good for dancing. So apparently, according to this condition, she makes a habit of making audio recordings of stressful interactions so she can review them later in a less stressful environment. What? Lizzo provided performance notes that were crucial to employment, so Miss Davis recorded this meeting so she could review it later on. She thought that was a good idea. Is anyone else getting what? You're recording your meetings? Now, unless you're recording them to expose her because she's apparently screaming at you, which then I can understand why everyone would be mad. A celebrity and you're recording them. On May 3rd, dancers were called to emergency wardrobe fitting. Security took all their phones. Lizzo became furious, hurling expletives at the group, saying she was going around the room, person by person, until someone told Lizzo who made the recording. She knew one of the dancers recorded their meeting. Yeah, she explained she never intended to harm Lizzo. She admitted she did it, Miss Davis. Lizzo responded, "There is nothing you can say to make me believe you." Miss Quigley and Lizzo then took turns berating Miss Davis. After cascading Miss Davis, Lizzo fired her on the spot. Now, here's what part of me, cynical me, would be like, well, wait a second, maybe this is deserved. You were recording a conversation privately with your employer, who was a celebrity. But Miss Rodriguez asked if she could have a word with Lizzo. This is the third person. She explained she did not appreciate how Lizzo handled the situation with Miss Davis and that Miss Rodriguez felt disrespected and therefore she would resign. This resignation drew both Miss Quigley and Lizzo's ire. Miss Quigley screamed at Miss Rodriguez and Miss Davis, calling them disrespectful. The fact that Miss Rodriguez then chimed in and joined and walked out with her, that's not good for Lizzo, in my opinion. So that's only echoes, okay, maybe there is more truth to all this than it seems. Lizzo aggressively approached Miss Rodriguez, cracking her knuckles, bailing her fists, balling her fists, explaining, "You're lucky. You're so effing lucky." Miss Rodriguez feared that Lizzo intended to hit her and would have done so. All the other dancers had not intervened. Security or manager did nothing. They did nothing to de-escalate it. Lizzo left the room. She raised both her middle fingers and yelled, "Bye, B." She returned to a hotel room escorted by 3 other dancers as they all feared Lizzo might return to, hurt her. Co-manager demanded that Miss Davis leave. Sorry, this is important. A co-manager demanded that then Miss Davis give her phone, and they went through all of her devices, in her iCloud, everything, trying to delete the recordings, which Miss Davis made it clear she had already deleted. Through a thorough search, confirmed Miss Davis had already deleted the recording from her phone. They were then held in confinement in their rooms and then finally packed up and left. So there you go. So that's the whole allegations here. And again, this doesn't look good for Lizzo. And it doesn't look good that others are now chiming in to echo these concerns. Now, again, innocent till proven guilty. This is, I guess, a civil case. I'm curious how much legally they actually have here. And again, like I said, we'll have Christopher Melcher on next to talk about it. And I'll give you a little bit more of my opinions. But I feel like there's, again, truth in the middle here. It seems like maybe there was a little bit of over-exaggeration on some of these to get this charge out, is my guess. But it does seem like there's enough parties here to confirm some of these stories. It doesn't look good for Lizzo. And at time of recording, Lizzo still had not made a response. The fact that Beyonce had time to respond and adjust her show and Lizzo has not is telling. But I'm very curious what Lizzo will say. And if she has a comment, we'll bring that to you in part 2, which is coming later. So again, hit that subscribe if you haven't already. Christopher will join us to break down the legality of all of this and much more here on Popcorn Planet. Whose team are you on? Tell me in the comments down below.